Hello to my Korean readers. My name is Tae Keller, and I'm the author of When You Trap a Tiger. I am so incredibly honored that this book has won the 100th Newbery Medal, and I'm so happy to share it with Korean readers because this book is based on my Korean heritage and the Korean stories that I heard growing up. So thank you to Changbang Books for making it widely available in Korea, and thank you to Dobege for translating it into Korean. I hope you enjoy it.
Well, how long did you write this book?
Yeah, this book took me about 3 years to write, and it went through 20 different drafts. So it was a very long process, and it changed so much from draft 1 to this final finished copy. And I think I learned so much over the course of writing this story, but I really learned that nothing is going to be perfect or even good on the first try. And I learned how important it is to be willing to keep trying again, even if you don't quite get it right the first time.
Do you think that you have any superpowers?
Yeah, so when I was younger, when I was Lily's age, I definitely felt invisible. And sometimes I would tell myself that that was a superpower in the same way that Lily does. But a lot of times I felt like that was a bad thing. And I felt really sad that I felt like I was too shy and too quiet. And I felt like that was something that I had to change about myself. And it was only as I've gotten older that I've really learned the beauty of that side of me, of the quieter side and the strength in the quiet. And something that I have really found is that my quietness lets me kind of step back and watch the world around me and observe the world. And I think that that is what I try to bring into my stories, is my observations of the world around me. And I also just feel like storytelling is magic, and it's a superpower in itself to be able to think of worlds, not just as a writer, but also I feel like I have a superpower when I read books, because when I read other people's stories, then I get to imagine what it's like to be someone else. And I get to learn about other people and how they think and how they live, even if their life is so completely different from my own. And so I always think that storytelling is its own superpower, and reading is so important.
In the story, the character is Lily and Sam. And who is much similar with you?
Am I more similar to Lily or to Sam? I think that I have been like both of them in my life. I think when I was in middle school, when I was Lily's age, I was a lot like Lily. I was very worried and afraid and shy. And I think when I was in high school, like Sam is, I was more like Sam. I was kind of closed off a little bit. I was a little bit angry. And so when I am writing, I'm always trying to bring a piece of myself into my characters. And my characters aren't like me. I'm also bringing in, like I said, inspiration from everywhere else. But there is a piece of me in every character, because when I can understand at least one little part of a character, then I can empathize with them and understand them and really build them so that they feel real and honest and true.
Why did you call Harmony? Why didn't you call her grandmother?
So why did I use the Korean word harmony instead of grandmother? So that's how I refer to my own harmony. That is always how I grew up. That is what I know. And so because I was kind of basing this character of Lily off of me in some ways, and I was basing the family off of my own family, it was really important to me to bring in the words that I use and that my family uses. And the Korean words were really important to me and who I am and my childhood. So I unfortunately don't speak Korean. So my connection to the language in a lot of ways is just a small handful of words. And so those words really are valuable to me. And I wanted to put this into the book to kind of, just because it was important to me, but I also knew that there would be readers who saw those words and felt excited because those are words that are from their culture. And I also knew that there would be readers who didn't know anything about Korea or Korean. And I thought that it was also important to be able to introduce those readers to certain words and just the idea of exploring other cultures.
Could you introduce the most impressive story that Harmony told you?
Yeah, so when I was younger, my Harmony lived with my family for a few years. And so I remember my sister and I, after our bedtime, when we were up too late, we would sneak into her room and we would lie down next to her and we would beg her to tell us Korean stories. And she told us a lot of stories, but my favorite one was the story about the tiger and the sun and the moon. And that is the story that I really based the book off of. It is the one, you know, where the tiger dresses up like the mom and chases the siblings and they run up into the sky and become the sun and the moon. And I just remember when she would tell me those stories, I would imagine that right outside my door, there was a tiger pacing, and I would imagine that I could hear the tiger scratching against the door. And even though in the original story, it's usually a brother and a sister, I would always ask her to change it to two sisters because I like to pretend that it was me and my sister in the story. And so that one has always had such a special place in my heart. And when I think of Korean stories, that's always the first one that comes to mind. So that was why it was so important for me to really build the story off of that one and really put that into the book.
Why did you decide that Harmony should die in the story at the end?
Yeah, so that was actually kind of a hard decision. And I think that it was a decision that I was really afraid to make at first because I knew that writing that scene would be really sad for me. And so a lot of my first drafts of the book, I didn't have her dying at the end because even though I kind of knew that that is what would be best for the story, there was a part of me that was afraid for that to happen because I didn't want to have to go through the emotions that I go through in order to write it. And I think that that fear kind of was a signal to me that that is what should happen because I just kept thinking, this will be so emotional for me to write it. And that was why I didn't want to. But I also knew that if it was emotional for me to write it, it would also be emotional and impactful for a reader. And what I'm trying to do when I write is to give the reader an emotional experience. And so that was kind of the sign that was telling me that this should happen. And I think that I also knew that, unfortunately, death is always a part of life. And there will always be people that we love, and one day they will die. And that is a really, really sad, scary thing. But it is a thing that all of us eventually do experience. And so because that is such a universal experience, I wanted to put that in the story because I knew that people would be able to understand and relate to it. And I was hopeful that maybe people who are going through what Lily is going through in the beginning of the book, you know, when someone that they love is sick and they're afraid of what's going to happen, that I thought maybe if I showed this happening in the story, that I could show this saddest possible outcome, and that even though that happens, Lily is still okay, and she is still surrounded by people that she loves and that love her and are able to support her through this really hard time.
So in the story, was the tiger real or a figment of her imagination?
Yeah, so I get this question a lot about whether the tiger was real or not. And I am sorry because I never actually answered that question. I feel like when I am writing, I am doing I'm doing half of the process. So I write the story, but when you are reading, you're doing the other half because you see the words on the paper and then you imagine the story in your mind. And so when you are reading a book, it's really a partnership. It's a collaboration between the author and you. And you are really important in that storytelling process. So I like to let the reader draw their own conclusions about the tiger, because I think that, you know, when you're reading it, you're bringing your own thoughts and your own imagination and your own experiences into the story. And because of all those things that you're bringing in, you're going to have a different reading experience than someone else. And that reading experience is just as important and valid and right. So I don't want to tell you that there's a right way or a wrong way to read this story. It's really kind of open to how you think about the story.
I'm 10 years old and my dream is to become an author. So where do you get materials or ideas for writing a book? And this actually ties in with another question that Grace Song just sent me. And she said, do you have any tips for kids who want to be writers? So maybe you could tie that in with your answer a little bit.
Yeah, so that's so exciting. I love to hear from younger people who are excited about writing and want to tell their own story. So first of all, just that is great. I'm so excited for you and happy to hear that people are interested in telling stories. I think that the advice that I always give to younger writers, and also just any writer in general, I mean, this is something I try to remind myself when I'm writing, is that you have to write for yourself first. So you are the person that is living with this story. It's in your head. You're the person working on it. And so you have to love this story and it has to be important to you. And I think that when we're thinking about, you know, other people reading this book or how to become an author or what it means to have a book published and to have readers, sometimes it can be easy to start worrying about other people and what other people will think and if someone else will like it. But really, the best thing to do is to focus on yourself and remember why you want to be a writer, whether that is because you feel like you have a story that is so important that you have to put into the world, or if it's because, you know, it's an escape from some of the stresses that you're feeling, or if it's because it's just a fun thing to do to make up worlds and make up characters. So focus on why you want to write, because that is going to get you through the harder parts and the worry, and it'll remind you that writing is a wonderful thing to do, and it is a joy to be able to do it. And then also the other part of that question of where I get material and inspiration from, I have a notes app on my phone. So I have a little document on my phone and I'm always looking for things. So like I said, I'm always trying to observe the world around me. And I'm paying attention to what people I know say. And if they say something that is really interesting or funny, I'll write it down a lot of the times. If I see someone walking down the street that I think is, wow, like what they're doing is so interesting, or, you know, I think that their outfit is really interesting, or something just sparks my imagination, then I'll be sure to pull out my phone and just jot down a note. So I'm always trying to bring observation from the world around me and just record it. And I don't always know what story it's going to go into or how it will fit into a story, but I just try to collect a lot of different inspiration. And I kind of think about it like, you know how birds will go out to build nests? They'll go and get little twigs from different places, and they'll get little leaves, and they'll bring all of these things in to build their nest. That's kind of what I imagine when I am pulling inspiration from all around the world. And then, so I will collect my little nest of inspiration. But what really will drive a story is one question that I have about the world that I can't easily answer. So that is something like with my first book, that was the question of what do we do when someone that we love is suffering from depression or mental illness? Or what do we do when someone that we love is sick and we don't know how to help them? And so I kind of wrote this book because I was trying to answer that question for myself. And I'll think about this question and I'll look at this inspiration that I've gathered and I'll try to build something from there. And then I had a similar question for When You Trap the Tiger, but I was also wondering, what do the stories that we hear, how does that influence us? And how do the stories of our ancestors shape who we are? And so that question really made its way into When You Trap the Tiger. So I guess that's kind of a long answer, but I think that what drives a story for me really is this one question that I'm really trying to understand about the world.
I'm writing an English book, but the story is like really boring. So how do you write awesome twists and climaxes?
Well, thank you for saying it's awesome. That is so nice of you. First of all, I'm sure that it is not boring. And I feel like you should celebrate what you're writing and don't tell yourself that it's boring, because I'm sure that there are things that are exciting about it to you. So I think that that is part of my advice, is to think about, if you were a reader, if you were reading your own book, what would be the thing that you would want to read? What is an exciting thing that you would want to see as a reader? And then you can kind of put that into your book. And something that I like to do if I'm feeling stuck, or if I'm feeling like I want something interesting or different or exciting to happen, is I like to think about my character, my main character. So for When You Trap a Tiger, I would think about Lily, and I would say, who is Lily? How does she think about herself? And in this case, Lily is quiet and shy, and she doesn't like to cause conflict or to draw attention to herself in any way. And I started thinking, okay, if that is who Lily is, what is something that Lily would never, ever do? And so I just started thinking about wild things that Lily could do that would seem so strange and out of character, kind of the opposite of who she would be. And I was listing funny things, and one of those things ended up into the book. And if you have read it, it is a certain scene with Mud and her best friend, Ricky. And that is where that scene originally came from. It was me saying, this is something that Lily would never do. And so once I have an idea of what Lily would never do, and I think, okay, this is kind of fun, I want to put it into the book, then I start to think, what would have to happen in Lily's life to force her into this kind of decision? What kind of events, what kind of people would have to be around her where she feels like this is what she has to do? And so that's kind of an interesting and exciting challenge for me. And that's kind of how I build surprising moments into my stories.
Yes, what did you do when you can't think about the story?
So what do I do when I can't think about the story, or when I'm stuck or something, or when I have writer's block? A lot of authors talk about writer's block when they don't know what to write next in their story. That sometimes is really hard. And I think that's something that every writer experiences. So I had definitely, when I was writing this book, I had points when I got stuck and I didn't know what should come next. And that can be really scary because, you know, I'm trying to write this story and I'm thinking I know what's going to happen. And then all of a sudden, my plan for what was going to happen doesn't really make sense anymore, or it doesn't feel right. And so when that happens, I need to take a step back and I need to start thinking about who is Lily? I need to start thinking about her as a character and the ways that she's going to change over the course of the book, and really examining her story. And I think that I've learned that I need to be open to different possibilities. So sometimes when I get the most stuck, it's because I thought that I knew what was coming next, but actually I didn't know. And when that happens, I will write out a whole list of anything in the world that could happen. I'll try to come up with 20, 30, 50 things that could happen next. And some of them are not very good, but I think that process really shows me that I can have an open list of possibilities. I don't need to limit myself. And it kind of takes the pressure off when I'm writing and lets me explore and keeps it fun. So I think that sometimes when I don't know what comes next, I can get really too focused and think that this is so serious. And I need to remind myself that writing is also very fun. So I think that's what I try to do when I don't know what's supposed to come next.
We were wondering if you could tell us a little bit about any of your next books that are coming up that you have in mind.
Yeah, so I have 2 books that are coming out next year. And the first book is called Jennifer Chan is Not Alone. And that is a book that is about bullying in middle school and trying to find forgiveness, and also about trying to search for aliens. So I've been doing a lot of research about aliens in space, which has been a lot of fun. And then my other book that is coming out is actually the start of a series for younger kids. So that is a book called Mihi Ever After. And that is about a Korean American girl who finds a way to travel into the Disney princess stories. And she starts to update those stories in a way that reflects her life a little bit better.
Is there any message that you would like to say to any of those fans who want to become writers? Any words of encouragement for them?
I think that it's great that you want to be a writer, and just keep writing and enjoying the writing and read a lot, because I have learned so much from reading other people's books. I feel like every book I read, I have a new teacher because that author is teaching me something new. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here today, and also thank you for reading this book and being excited about it, and for reading in general. It just makes me so happy, and I am so glad and excited to be able to connect with you guys. 감사합니다. Thank you so much. Bye.